Folks, welcome to the Magnus the Loot Crate Halloween special. I am your host, as always, Magnus Stickin. Now, folks, truth be told, this will probably be posted on All Saints Day. Let's be honest about that. But folks, for Halloween, I thought I'd do something a little special for you, and I'm going to read you a story from the book Ghost Tales of the Uwharries. Now, folks, I'm going to go ahead and be honest, I'm not really good at reading stories. I can kind of get through telling a story, but when it comes to reading, a pre-written story, that's a little harsh. But you know what, folks? It's Halloween, and I want to do something special for you, although, like I say, it's probably not going to make it onto YouTube until All Saints Day. So, folks, you know what? Enjoy the story. Time was when itinerant peddlers circulated through the Uwharries, selling their trinkets, medical cures, and oft-times their advice and services. For these vagabond salesmen, the rural people always had a cool drink of spring water and time for a few minutes' chat. Because they displayed an interesting assemblage of goods and brought fascinating stories and news of faraway places, they were, more often than not, welcome overnight guests in the country homes. Many of them, to reduce overhead and encumbrances, walked and lived off the land, carrying their merchandise in shoulder packs or hand satchels, and relying upon their wit and glibness to provide them with necessities. Such a man was Irishman Peddler Paul. He walked slowly now, with his shoulders hunched slightly forward, as if straining against the burdensome shoulder pack, which had become so depleted that he carried it by his side as a hand satchel. A small, weak man in his 40s, he knew well the rigors of the road, but he was quite unreconciled to the mysterious wild Uwharrie country and its people. Underneath his air of bluster and salesmanship, he was a timid man, susceptible to impulsive action and instability in time of stress. Sunset one late summer day caught him on the back road in the Uwharries, with not in sight but run-down two-story house on the next hill. He stopped there and requested lodging for the night. The folks agreed to take him in. It wasn't long before Peddler Paul realized that his choice of shelter had been an unfortunate one. There were no children in the home, and the elderly man and woman were a strange, silent pair with shifty eyes. Peddler Paul felt undertones of unpleasantness and mystery in the house. The whole atmosphere was one of hostility. His uneasiness was helped not at all by the abrupt entry of a third individual, a brawny, dim-witted giant who took his seat at the supper table and proceeded to wolf down his food. The meal was eaten in silence. No one asked the peddler of news of the road. Bedtime was suggested soon after supper. When Peddler Paul picked up his pack of merchandise, he thought he saw the grim-faced man and woman exchange glances. They escorted him up the narrow, twisting stairway to the second floor, the old woman carrying a kerosene lamp to light the way. The old man pushed open a thick wooden door, shoved his blocky, brutal face close to Peddler Paul's, and growled, "In here." Peddler Paul stepped into the dark room, and the heavy door creaked shut behind him. He heard the distinct metallic click as the door was bolted from the outside. Locked in! He became thoroughly alarmed now. What possible reason could they have for locking him inside except to do him bodily harm? Striking a match, he found the stub of a candle on the old dresser and lit it. The feeble light showed him the sparse furnishings of the room. A rough bed, the covers mussed and smelly, stood against one wall. He stood at the door and listened. He heard his hosts go back downstairs. There was a buzz of whispered voices, then a door opened and slammed. He went to the lone window and found it nailed securely shut. He looked out into the black night. The sight he saw made his heart skip a few beats and set his teeth chatter. Out there, at the edge of the yard, framed in a circle of lantern light, was the dimwit he had seen at the supper table. The man swung a pick, digging a rectangular-shaped hole in the ground. A grave? It couldn't be anything else. And for whom? There wasn't much doubt about that either. Peddler Paul shuddered and trembled anew. Back to the door he crept and listened carefully. The sound he heard had put a chilly finger into his heart. Up the stairs came the unmistakable sound of a knife or an axe being sharpened against a grindstone. Dizzy now with fright, he staggered to the bed and lay in shock on the foul covers. He had lain there for some time before he became aware of a new sound, this one close by. A low moan or groan came from under the bed. He jerked upright to listen. It came again, a forlorn and despairing groan. He was sure now. It came from under the bed. He got up and lifted a candle from the dresser, threw back the low-hanging covers, and knelt beside the bed. The first thing he saw as he bent low and peered underneath was the glassy eyes and stark, cold face of a dead man. Peddler Paul recoiled to the middle of the floor and sprawled there, stifling a scream of terror trying to burst from his mouth. He scrambled to his feet and cringed against the far wall, but even from there he could see the light of the fallen candle reflecting in the glazed eyes of the dead man under the bed. For moments he stood there, trembling against the wall, unable to wrest his gaze from the eerie glint of candlelight mirrored in the corpse's eyes. The thudding of a pick again registered faintly in his ears. He leaned over and peered out the window. The dimwit stood almost waist-deep in the grave he was digging. The steady grating of the cutting tool being wetted against the rough stone continued to drift up the stairs. As he started to approach the body again, a white vapor began to emerge from under the bed where the body lay. It swelled, waveringly, until it reached the dimensions of a man. Peddler Paul clasped a hand over his open mouth to keep from screaming. He realized that this white wraith must be the ghost of the dead man under the bed. The ghost stood between him and the bed. "Don't be alarmed, friend," the ghost said. "I've come to help you. We've got to outwit this murderous old bastard and his hag wife, and we can do it if you'll put my poor, dead, mutilated body on that bed again." When he could again command his faculties, Paul nodded assent. The frost-colored apparition appeared friendly enough. He began to take heart. Sickening as it was, Peddler Paul complied with the ghost's request. He pulled the stiff body from under the bed, grasped it around the middle, and wrestled it up onto the bed. In doing so, he noted the gory stab wound in the chest and crusty dried blood all over the front of the white shirt. Every pocket of the corpse's expensive suit had been turned wrong side out. The ghost looked on pathetically. "Sorry I can't help you, friend, but it would not do at all for me to help you lug my own poor dead body around." When the grisly task was accomplished, Peddler Paul, at the ghost's bidding, pulled the covers up over the chin of the corpse so that it resembled a man sleeping in bed. Peddler Paul was still worried. "But they can tell it's you in the bed and not me," he said. "They'll notice the difference before I can get away." "Leave it to me," the ghost said. "I've learned a trick or two in this ghosting business since my untimely initiation a few days ago. I'll handle that part of the deal." They chatted for an interval, and from the friendly ghost, Peddler Paul learned that the dead man had been a wealthy hardware merchant on his way through the Uwharries on horseback. He had been headed towards the western part of the state to establish a new store with the considerable sum of money he carried on his person. He had stopped there for lodging several nights ago, and the old couple had murdered and robbed him while he slept. Stealthy footsteps ascended the stairway. The ghost motioned Peddler Paul to station himself behind the door, where he wouldn't be seen when it swung inward. He waited there, nerves taut as a banjo string. The ghost had vanished. Muffled whispers came from outside the door. The bolt clicked back very softly, and the door swung in silently. Peddler Paul's heart thumped fast and heavy as he waited, hidden behind the open door, while the man and woman entered. Satisfied that the man in bed was fast asleep, as indeed he was, they crept closer. "Hold the lamp up high, woman," the old man ordered in a calloused whisper, "so I can see how to get him and get the first lick." And a long-bladed butcher knife, raised high in his hand, glinted wickedly in the lamplight. Peddler Paul waited to see no more. Intent on their murderous business, the old couple failed to see him as, satchel in hand, he edged out the door behind them. But as he moved out the door, he had one more shot. He glanced at the figure in bed. It was not the face of the dead man that showed from under the covers. It was his own face. It was the face of Peddler Paul there in the bed. He was aghast. The ghost had kept his promise, but Peddler Paul wasted no time trying to figure out how. He hurried down the stairs and across the room. Wildly encouraged by the success of the plan thus far, he jerked open the outside door, but there, facing him at the entrance, stood the dimwit, the giant of a man. Peddler Paul almost collapsed. but freedom was so near that he choked back his fear and dashed madly by the hulking monster, who stood there slowly scratching his head in puzzlement. Peddler Paul didn't stop running for miles. He was never seen in that area again. But somewhere in the Uwharrie hills there is an unmarked grave which, even today, no matter how often it is filled, keeps sinking in. It is a grave that was dug for 2 bodies, and it got only 1. So folks, there you are. You got to hear Magnus read a story to you for Halloween. So folks, I hope you enjoyed yourselves. Have a safe and happy Halloween, and I will see you next time.